To prevent you from seeing what you are about to see tonight. This is the story of a little boy who was beaten to death in 1998. Terrell Peterson was allegedly murdered by his foster mother, but as we first reported in January, there was an accomplice to this crime. It is the state of Georgia. Terrell is one of many children assaulted in Georgia after coming to the attention of the state's child welfare agency. Exactly what happens to these children is a mystery because the state keeps their records a secret. That's supposed to protect the privacy of the child, but we found that the privacy law is also used to cover up the negligence of state officials. Because of this, no one can say how many children have suffered, as Terrell did, in a state of neglect. In January 1998, Terrell was rushed through the doors of an Atlanta emergency room. As doctors struggled to restart his heart, they may have been appalled by the cuts, the bruises, the cigarette burns. But the truly alarming thing was how a boy the age of 5 could possibly weigh 29 pounds.
Thank God he was dead.
Thank God he was dead?
Well, I think anybody that would have known or understood what this little guy was going through would rejoice in his death.
Don Keenan is an Atlanta lawyer. He has taken up Terrell's case in a lawsuit against the state of Georgia.
A lot of people say, oh, was it the several concussions that he had on his head? Did that kill him? Did the uncountable number of bruises kill him? Did the lacerations kill him? Did the starvation kill him? I mean, I'm the little guy's lawyer, and I think he just gave up.
The tragedy of the death of Terrell is that he gave up at a time when he should have been safe, under the care of the state of Georgia. Terrell, so the State Department of
Family and Children's Services encouraged another family to take him, in effect making Terrell their foster child. And under Georgia law, there are strict rules the department must follow when dealing with foster children.
The very first place that child has to go is the immediate blood family. End of story. Just that simple. Number two, when a child is in foster care, then it's absolutely 100% required that that child be visited on a monthly basis, face to face. And then third and finally, when they're in foster care, no corporal punishment. You can't slap them, you can't hit them, you can't take a belt to them, you can't do anything.
But the department ignored each and every rule. Terrell was in the care of Fran Peterson. She was not immediate family, not directly related to Terrell at all. She was the grandmother of Terrell's half-brother and half-sister. She cared for all 3 children in her Atlanta apartment. And while caseworkers were supposed to visit monthly, in fact, they rarely ever appeared. If they had come here, they might have heard what Terrell's half-brother and half-sister told investigators after the murder, that Terrell was often tied up.
One time when first the school go out.
Who ties him up?
Grandma.
Grandma ties him up. Does he get tied up a lot, or was that the first time he was tied up?
He get tied up a lot.
After his death, the police discovered that pantyhose had been used to keep Terrell tied to a banister in the apartment. They found these instructions, allegedly written by Ms. Peterson. He gets a bowl of oatmeal for breakfast, lunch he gets grits, and dinner he gets grits. His hands are always tied. Even outside the home, anyone could see that Terrell was in danger. Joanne Bryant was his Head Start teacher.
There was one day in school that you found Terrell rummaging through a trash can?
Yes. He was going through the trash can and he was looking for food. I said, Terrell, we do not eat out the trash can.
What do you think now that you know everything?
I believe he was starved. They starved him to death.
Though Terrell was starving, there was still a chance to save his life. After a Thanksgiving beating in 1996, Terrell made his first trip to the emergency room. The doctor diagnosed battered child syndrome. Terrell accused Miss Peterson, and on the strength of his testimony, she was arrested and directed to appear in court. But when the courtroom was called to order that day, someone was missing. Terrell's caseworker, Cheryl Elmore, never showed up. It was up to her to bring Terrell to court and to press the charges. With no victim in the courtroom, the judge had no choice but to dismiss the case. Ms. Elmore might have acknowledged the error and asked to have the hearing rescheduled, but she didn't. Instead, she wrote a memo that would seal Terrell's fate.
The caseworker issued a backdated, fraudulent lie of a memo that said the judge, after hearing all the evidence, determined that there was no child abuse and dismissed the case. An absolute boldface, unadulterated lie.
Elmore's memo said, quote, "The judge believed Ms. Peterson and did not feel she was guilty of child abuse." With those words, the department concluded Terrell was safe, closed his file, and sent him back to Ms. Peterson. Elmore has never explained her memo, so we asked Peggy Peters, who was the head of the Department of Family and Children's Services at the time of Terrell's death.
Here you had this boy who'd been so savagely beaten. She knew what kind of environment she was sending him back to. How do you make that decision?
Again, I can't speak for Miss Elmore. I certainly would not have made that decision.
Could the people of Georgia look at this record and conclude that your department aided and abetted in the murder of that child?
We have looked at the record. My staff has looked at it numerous times. We won't ever know if we could have made a difference.
Terrell returned to Head Start class, but by now there was something terribly wrong, something he didn't want to tell his teacher.
And I said, Terrell, what happened? Are you injured? He never said anything. So I said, well, let me take him. I took him in the teacher's lounge, and I pull off his shoe. And on his foot, I think his left foot, I seen that he was burnt. And I said, oh, my God.
But she was so mad about being arrested that she burned the flesh off of both of the bottom of his feet within a week after getting him back. Burned the bottom of his feet so bad that he had to have skin transplanted from his hip onto his little feet so he could walk.
How many times did Family and Children's Services see Terrell between the time he was in the hospital with third-degree burns on his feet and the time he was dead?
Not one single time.
Not once in a year. Only the photographs made by the coroner can describe what those months were like. The coroner found it hard to choose a cause of death. In the end, he wrote simply, blunt impact injuries to the head, trunk, and extremities. Fran Peterson is charged with capital murder. But the death of Terrell is not the end of the story. In fact, it's just the beginning. The Department of Family and Children's Services conducted 2 internal investigations, and the conclusions were devastating, including failure to make contacts, failure to conduct mandatory monthly meetings, a serious lack of judgment, and numerous violations throughout the history of the case. But these were internal investigations. The public didn't know anything about them. When the terrible findings came in, officials of the department decided to take action. They decided to cover up what they had done. The department's only public statement was written by Ralph Mitchell, the administrator of the Atlanta office. He wrote, "The department shares the sense of outrage at the loss of precious life," but he concludes that the department always responds immediately and comprehensively to child abuse, and, quote, "All of these steps were followed in the case of Terrell." After making that false statement to the media, Mitchell wrote this private memo to his boss at state headquarters. He admits the press release is untrue, but he goes on to reassure his boss that, fortunately, there have been no further calls from the media to follow up or contest the statement. This memo is addressed to Peggy Peters.
And when it says the policies of the state of Georgia were followed, that's a lie. You disagree?
I told Mr. Mitchell to correct that statement.
Fortunately, there have been no further calls from the media to follow up or contest the information contained in this statement. He's saying it's okay. We got away with it. Nobody called to follow up.
And I continue to say that what I had told him to do was to correct that statement.
Did he do so?
Not to my knowledge.
Miss Peters, you're the boss. The buck stops there. You knew what the truth was, and you let the lie stand.
I let the fact that Mr. Mitchell did not correct the statement stand.
You asked him to correct it. He didn't do it, and that was it.
That's correct.
None of the department's officials had any fear of being found out because Terrell's records were sealed by the state privacy law. It nearly worked. The cover-up lasted more than a year until Terrell's files were delivered anonymously to attorney Don Keenan.
If it weren't for somebody, and I'm convinced, inside the department who just couldn't sleep anymore, who couldn't live with themselves, and if that wouldn't have happened, that lie would still be sticking.
And Terrell's case is not the only one. Former supervisors in the department told us that bungled cases are routinely covered up. Fred Zachary says the privacy law has created a culture of indifference.
I have seen during my tenure confidentiality used to cover up sloppy work, used to diminish the risk for litigation.
Zachary says he was fired by the department because he insisted on working by the book. Now he's suing the state.
For so long, it had been accepted that if you made the visits, okay. If you didn't make the visits, nothing was going to happen. If a child died, the child died.
Children die, they can lie about it, and simply move on.
Or say nothing about it and simply move on.
Roy Barnes is Georgia's governor. He took office 1 year ago and has ordered a review of all foster care deaths.
Do you have any good fix on how many children have been murdered in foster care?
No, I do not. And we are reviewing the files now to try to determine how many children died from other than accidental or causes or natural causes. It's difficult to tell what was the cause of death, particularly if you had a lack of the supervision to see what the cause of the death was.
Ralph Mitchell, the supervisor who wrote the cover-up memo, was directed by the governor's office to talk with us. He declined and took medical leave. Cheryl Elmore, the caseworker who failed to appear in court, also declined an interview.
Where is Cheryl Elmore working today?
It is my understanding she is in another office in Fulton County.
Still working for the department?
Still working for the department.
Where's Ralph Mitchell working now?
He's currently the county administrator for Fulton County Division, Department of Family and Children's Services.
Same job.
Same job.
You may be wondering what happened to Terrell's half-sister and half-brother who were in the household at the time of the murder. Their new caseworker evaluated all that had gone before and drew up a plan to send them back to Fran Peterson.
The caseworker writes, Ms. Peterson will cooperate with the agency and continue to show interest in the support of the children while they are at home. Presumably when she's not in court being tried for murder.
That's right.
Is that reasonable?
I think, again, you have to look at the individual situation, and if she had not harmed those other children, then it might be acceptable.
The department finally decided that it was not acceptable to send the children back. They are now with another family. After we reported this story, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation raided several offices of the Department of Family and Children's Services. A criminal investigation is now ongoing in several cases of murdered children. Also, the Georgia legislature passed the Terrell Peterson law, which allows doctors to take temporary custody of battered children at the hospital. And Ralph Mitchell, the supervisor who issued the press release designed to cover up Terrell's case, has now retired from the department.